Thanks for joining me. We're going to talk a little bit about zombies. In particular, we're going to talk about the zombie apocalypse, or potential of it. We're going to do that by exploring theories of causation. So for those of you that aren't familiar, although hopefully only one person watches this before I can delete it, theories of causation, or just our thoughts and ideas on why something happens. We'll talk a little bit about the disease process. We won't get as much into that, time's sake, but we'll talk a little bit about the movement of disease and how things might happen. And we're going to also talk about potential outcomes, but we're going to do all of this through the lens of microbiology. So zombie, it's a pretty big topic. Microbiology is a big topic. We're going to try to hone in a few minutes and talk about the theories, disease process, and potential of zombies through the microbiology lens. So, first a few, I think, helpful definitions. So microbiology is the study of organisms, living organisms, but in particular a few bacteria, protozoa, fungus, virus. So that is the study of microbiology. So micro meaning small, biology, living, study of living things. So also, just so I'm on board with you, disease process, this is any process or ailment that is outside of the normal physiological functioning. So disease process, that's helpful to know. We're not talking about normal, we're talking about abnormal. I would say zombie, a zombie presentation would be abnormal. I think that's fair. Okay. Why talk about this at all? Well, I have some personal interest, but let's talk big picture first. So pop culture. Of course, The Walking Dead is a huge pop phenomenon, right? The Walking Dead, the Fear of the Walking Dead, it's their spinoff. 28 Days Later, that was a really popular movie that focused on the zombie apocalypse and the aftermath. Z Nation, Dawn of the Dead, that one's like really popular. Quarantine, that kind of rings bells of pandemic and epidemic. Also, the CDC, not too long ago, a couple years ago now, did a zombie apocalypse or a zombie preparedness kit. People really freaked out about this. I probably would have too. If I'd called on before, everyone was like, hey, don't worry. It's really the CDC's, that's kind of their hype campaign. We want you to know more about what the CDC does. But it was an interesting spin. They took something popular and got people interested in CDC, emergency preparedness. But that link's still out there if you want to check that out. But I think, and why I drew to this for today's few minutes, is the human interest in the unknown, fear, maybe fascination with things that are scary, fear of the unknown there at the bottom. So that's why we're going to talk about zombies. All these reasons. Okay. But first, let's kind of clarify what a zombie is. Now, remember, signs and symptoms are different. We talked about this semester. So signs are what I can see. So if I'm the zombie walked in the living room here, I could say, I know that because first, reanimation. So this is basically the coming back to life, reanimate. Decay of skin. I'd probably notice that. If I'm thinking The Walking Dead, I'm looking at a zombie, I'm noticing the skin looks a little off there. That's more than a pressure ulcer. Also, the individual would be dead. Maybe that's a little harder to tell, but if I've got a skilled eye and I'm like, that person looks dead. And also, thirst for human flesh. If I can notice this person's going after eating other people, I'm going, that's might be a zombie. Symptoms are reported by the zombie. I don't know anyone who got close enough to interview a zombie and say, tell me how you're feeling, tell me kind of your symptoms. So patient zombie. Anyway, they CDC reported, if it were their scenario, the person would have a fever, flu-like symptoms. I guess that's where it starts. And for some of our scenarios today, they will. Sudden interest in eating others' flesh. Yep, that would be concerning. And then as well as death. So, I know we're getting close on time here, but let's just keep rolling. Theories of causation. I'm going bacteria, virus, and fungus for today. Those are the three we're going to focus on. Those are big facets of microbiology. I think the most translatable for what we're doing today. So those are the three that we'll talk about, but some honorable mentions, just because I think these are kind of cool. Walking corpse syndrome, also known as Cotard's delusion. So this is a psychiatric condition. It's not microbiology, but folks develop this delusion. They think they're dead, and the Walking Dead, literally. I've had the opportunity to see that once in my psych career. It was pretty interesting. NASA, or nuclear radiation, I don't really know anything about radiation, but this is a theory that floats around, so one other out there. And then prions. Now, this is a microbiology concept for today. We don't have time. But know that prions is also, you can look online and see how people think prions perhaps lead to a zombie apocalypse in a microbiology lens. So, all right, moving on. First, we're going to talk about scenario one. We're going to talk about bacteria. So, when we're talking bacteria here, I've got a little diagram, kind of hard to see, but it's hand sketched there, so you can tell. So, real-world comparisons, that's the way we're going to do these couple scenarios. I think the easiest way is to think real world, and then we'll talk potential mutation based on the infection or whatever we're specifically talking about, and how I think it might happen. So, anyway, bacteria, bacterial meningitis, meningitis affecting the meninges, leprosy, typhus. These are some real world examples. I don't know that we're as familiar. Most of us are not as familiar with these. I'm going bacterial meningitis for today's comparison. So, signs and symptoms here. Someone would develop nausea, vomiting, and altered mental status. Well, if I'm craving human flesh, I would say that's an altered mental status for myself. So, bacterial meningitis is a bacterial infection, again, affecting the meninges. So, these are the symptoms, some of the symptoms. So, how I think this potentially might play out. If the bacterial meningitis infection mutated in some way, it would allow the bacteria to cross the blood-brain barrier. And I think the three areas it would have to hit would be the hypothalamus, the oblongata, and the cerebral cortex. Why? Because it's going to impact appetite. Suddenly I have a taste for human flesh. That's going to be an issue. The oblongata for rage, anger. Yeah, I would say zombies are pretty angry. I haven't seen any depiction of a friendly one. Well, I have in one movie, but anyway. And then cerebral cortex for empathy. I think you'd have to lack empathy to suddenly start eating other humans. Your children, your neighbors, your professor. Just kidding. Okay, so why this works? Of course, bacteria, it's proven to mutate. Bacteria changes, it grows. We find new examples of this. I think it's possible that it mutates, so maybe it works that way. And it also is proven to transmit. We know bacteria moves. I mean, that's how we've developed some of these. Leprosy, for example. We know it moves person to person. So that's how it could work. But I'm going to bust this one because I think vaccines exist for a lot of these things. So if it did mutate enough, maybe it would be hard to keep up, the vaccine to keep up. But I don't know. I think it wouldn't be that difficult to alter it. And I have this theory of quarantine and kill. If I see someone, bacterial infection, they're developing the symptoms, quarantine them and it kills the bacteria, potentially kills the person, but they're a zombie, they're already dead. So I'm not going this one. This isn't my favorite. Scenario 2 has gotten a lot of traction. So let's say here, real world comparisons, Ebola, Zika, HIV. Those have gotten a lot of attention recently. Zika just this last summer. Avian flu, maybe we're not thinking it's scary and dangerous, but really flu is actually very dangerous. Kills a lot of people every year. And viral encephalitis. So that's the one I'm going with today. Let's look signs and symptoms here. Gait and balance issues, agitation, olfactory hallucinations, and here's the biggie, personality changes. Zombie suddenly craving human flesh, walking awkwardly. I think every depiction, zombies kind of walk awkward, they have gait issues. So this one I think could work. I'm going viral encephalitis, primary infection, virus that attacks the brain itself. Encephalitis is the swelling of the brain. So there's a virus that enters the brain fights it, the brain swells, and along with that comes these symptoms. This one has, I think, some traction. Viruses are easily spread. Think chickenpox and flu here. Things move quickly, they pass person to person. There's potential. It can move quickly. So again, I'm going chickenpox and flu. You get one kid in school with chickenpox, almost the whole class can get it if they haven't had it already. So carrier may be unaware that they have the virus. So there's a latency period, if you will. So I've got a virus, the flu, and I don't know I get it because my symptoms are brewing. I get on a plane. There's 70 people on the plane. I get off the plane, a day later I have the flu. Well, I've left that virus available for others. Also, primary encephalitis can be quick and aggressive. So if I'm saying this is a mutation of a viral encephalitis, that can happen and hit you hard and fast. So zombie apocalypse, one of the ways that works is it moves quickly. It spreads to a population very quickly. So this has some credence. But why I'm going to bust it, it can also move slowly. Viruses don't have to move quickly. There is, again, that latency period. Sometimes there's not a full-blown expression of the virus. Like I can have milder flu symptoms. I know that some physicians would disagree with that, but definitely people have flu worse than others. That's some immune issues as well. But anyway, I'm leaving it there as how it busts. And also, carriers can be identified in quarantine. We know when someone has, let's say, HIV if they come to a clinic. So I think you could potentially quarantine folks and prevent the mass pandemic or epidemic that is a zombie apocalypse. Okay, so the last one we've got is fungus. Now this was one, Will, I'm sure you're going to do a great job as you listen to this, deciphering how to say these specific fungi. I will not, so I'm going to give you the shorthand that works for me. So fungus, there's a few here I'm mentioning. The OO fungus, also called the snake fungal disease, SKD. White nose syndrome in bats, that's also caused by a fungus there. And the one that I'm really interested in for this one, the zombie fungus. That's the one on the bottom here. So the signs and symptoms of that dictates movement. So the zombie fungus affects a population of ants. This is true, this exists, it's out there. And so they found that this fungus would attack ants and it dictated their movements. It literally caused them to get up and move in a direction that is not part of the normal pattern. Also, it dictated food choice. If this potentially mutated, could this fungus make their food choice go from pizza and fries to people and pheasants? I don't know. Anyway, it's deadly. It's going to kill them. Zombies, it's deadly. And also changes behavior. So this fungus would get into an ant. And it would cause the ant to completely change its normal patterns of behavior. So the fungus gets in the ant, or the ant goes through the fungus, whatever you want to say it, and it causes the ant to leave the colony, go to a leaf, bite the main vein, and stay there. That's not normal ant behavior at all. The ant's job, is to go get some food, do its work, come back to the colony, live for the queen. So this ant, or the affected ant, would go attach itself to a leaf, the main vein, and stay there until death, which was pretty quick because the fungus eats the ant from inside out and spreads the illness if other ants come through or the ants go through the fungal area, killed it. So why I think that works, although I think that's pretty compelling on and of itself, why I think the potential for a fungus being the cause of a zombie apocalypse is, so fungus can reproduce quickly. Fungus don't need a lot of energy and inertia. They can reproduce very quickly. Fungus can also, they don't need a host. I'm jumping down here, sorry, but fungus don't need a host to survive. Like the fungus doesn't need to live within something else to exist. Fungus exists on its own, out in the real world. Fungus can be viable for years, so you don't need ideal conditions. We'll talk about the conditions in a second, but fungus can just be viable for a long time while waiting for its prey. Hopefully not humans. And some fungal infections are generalists. I think the snake fungal disease there that we were just talking about, they noted when they went in and did the research, Yale did this great article about it, that the fungus was actually a generalist. So it didn't just impact one population of snakes. Any snake that came in contact with it, it killed it or darn near killed it. And also, here's why I think this one, I'm not trying to get political, sorry if it does sound that way, climate change is real. And our climate is changing, it's getting warmer, and those are the conditions in which fungus love to live. So if I have a fungus as a unknown, or I just know a little bit about it, and climate change, it gets warmer, fungus grows, it mutates before science can keep up with it if we mess with that funding too much, there's a potential that the fungus could mutate, just as it did in these other populations, ants, bats, and snakes, and we are living organisms, so are they. it's quite possible, in my opinion, I'm not a microbiologist, but thanks to some great information this year, I'm going that fungus could mutate and lead itself to a zombie apocalypse. So that's that. Here's my references: CDC, Yale, Nat Geo for the rabies. They did an article, was kind of inspirational for this. Rabies mutation, zombie apocalypse. Google that. Will Moore for a great semester, and Robert Koch doing a throwback there to one of the originals. So that's that. Thanks.